currently 77. Next news coming up at 8. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Papa Nicholas Coffee. Papa Nicholas, best beans, best roast, best coffee.
When you've got questions, he always has an answer. It's Sean Hannity this afternoon at 2, right before Joe Walsh at 5 on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina. Started out as a Trump opponent. He ran for president, and he hasn't always agreed with the president. But when he does so vociferously, and he was on with Maria Bartiromo over the weekend with respect to border security and the condition at border detention facilities and so forth. And Lindsey Graham was not providing much quarter to those sentimental barbarians on the left, to say the least.
I saw a system completely overwhelmed for no good reason. Our laws are set up such that if you can bring a small child to America coming from Central America, we can only hold the child for 20 days. Then we let the entire family go because we don't want to separate families. We can't process a case in 20 days. What did I see? 52,000 people have been released into the interior of the United States from this one Border Patrol area alone. What did I see? A system about to break. I saw brave men and women who are doing an incredible job under difficult circumstances, and I'm going to introduce a resolution next week praising them, the men and women of the Border Patrol and their allies. I saw 900 illegal immigrants that were captured for coming into our country illegally, housed in detention facilities that was meant for 385, so they had to put a tent in the back. What I saw is a bunch of people have been here before, broke the law before, and we're not going to let them go. I don't care if they have to stay in these facilities for 400 days. We're not going to let those men go that I saw. It would be dangerous. And I also saw that 60 different nations are sending people here illegally. We caught people from Iran, Syria, every place in the world. They're coming through our border. All of them broke our law. Many of them have done it before, and we're not going to let them go. This is not a concentration camp that I saw. It is a facility overwhelmed. I'm willing to buy beds for these people so they'll have a better place to get a night's sleep, but I'm not going to let them go.
So, I mean, the choice is pretty stark in terms of the policy vision for border security and legal immigration. Particularly given what President Trump has already presented in terms of possible compromises for more border barrier funding with respect to DACA designees and even those who were eligible who didn't choose to avail themselves of such designation. So it makes it a bit difficult, I think, for some of our friends in the sort of Republican or neocon ranks who broke with Trump during 2016, who advocated, even some of them did, to vote for Hillary Clinton, who have broken with him on any number of occasions over the last 2.5 years, only to find themselves in this place where it's Trump or, in all likelihood, a socialist. So what's it going to be? Well, Sarah Longwell is the publisher of the Bulwark, bulwark.com. That's a new site, mentioned a couple of times here before, some pieces. That's founded by the likes of Bill Kristol, friend of the show. No, we disagree. Charlie Sykes, formerly of Milwaukee, friend of the show. We've had on, talk about his book. And are we seeing never Trumpers remove the never, if nothing but for political expedience sake in 2020? Well, let's put that to Sarah Longwell. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So that's the sort of the subject of your piece that I found
great piece,
interesting, called The Breakup. I mean, it just was never going to work. You and Chris Hayes arm in arm, was it?
Well, yeah, the piece is, look, for those of us who have been opposed to President Trump, you can call us never Trumpers. There's a lot of people who said never Trump and then decided that they didn't really actually mean never. But I would say that the people in our camp still mean never when it comes to Trump. However, what's going on now is as you see the Democratic candidates sort of picking up steam, they had their first debate, and I think for those of us who are never Trump, the thing that is always striking, I think, or hard for the left to remember is that we are still very much conservatives. And so when you hear Kamala Harris say that she's going to, enact her version of gun reform via executive order, or you hear Elizabeth Warren talking about eliminating private insurance, anything that Bernie Sanders says, we find ourselves in a real predicament because we disagree with absolutely everything we're hearing from the left, and yet we still are never Trump. And so that is puts us in sort of a political wasteland where we're, gotten used to living.
Well, what is your major point of contention with President Trump?
Well, I think I'll just speak for myself personally, but there really aren't enough tax cuts or judges in the world that would make me okay with or accept or ignore that he stands on a stage with Vladimir Putin and sides against America's own intelligence community. He lies every day as easy as he breathes. Just last night, we see him telling American congresswomen, because they're brown, to go back to their home countries. I mean, Trump is an illiberal, and I mean that in the broad sort of Western democracy term. He's an illiberal person who doesn't understand the fundamentals of this country. I think he is not a good person. I think he is not a good president. We are fundamentally diametrically opposed on our values. And so, there is nothing at this point that would make me say, oh, well, I like the tax cuts. I like the judges. I may agree, with certain policy areas, but I'm just going to ignore the rest of this stuff. Because for me, you cannot ignore it, and it is fundamental to who we are as a country.
And so do you think Trump, you said he's illiberal. I mean, is there something that he's done, and I don't mean instinctively wanted to do, I mean actually done. I'm not talking about tweets. I'm talking about policy decisions that has run afoul of the small L liberal traditions of our representative republic?
Well, I mean, whether it's tanks in the streets or a military parade, whether it is, I mean, let's just talk about what he just said yesterday about these congresswomen, telling them they're Americans, telling them to go back to their home country. Yeah. That is illiberal. And then let's talk about irresponsible. What do we care about as conservatives? Do we care about the debt? Do we care about the deficit? Is that important to us? Is it fundamental to what it means to be a conservative? Well, what do you think about Trump's spending habits?
Well, I don't like them. I'm appalled by them. I started from the beginning, but I also knew what I was getting when you had a candidate who said entitlements were off the table. If you're not serious about talking about entitlements, then you're not serious about doing anything to curb federal spending. So I blame both parties and all the presidents that have come before Trump, and now including Trump on that score. However, the problem I have is, on the one hand, you say, focus on things like the deficit spending, the debt accumulation. Okay, fair. Focus on things that I don't support, like the tariff policy. But you can't consider Supreme Court nominees, or you can't consider tax cuts, or you can't consider his policies or attempted policies at the border. And so I think you can't pick and choose what you want to contemplate. You have to contemplate it all, don't you? Make a sort of a realpolitik decision on the sum total of it.
You can, but then you and I are doing different math. Because to me, a Republican president who rules by executive order, who has an expansive view of executive authority, who is constantly, and this is the thing, I know it just sounds lefty to say that he's racist, but he is. He began his whole, there's a lot of people who get accused of being racist, and I would say that's not racism, that's an overreaction from the left. This is the guy who began his whole campaign with a racist smear against President Obama, acting like he wasn't actually from this country. Now, the question is whether or not we can tolerate that as a party, whether or not we as a Republican Party are okay with and will stand by silently while he does these things. And if we say yes, then that is on us. If we trade that because we like this immigration policy, then I think we have made a grave error in our calculation.
Well, but in your piece, though, the breakup, you write, if never Trump-type Republicans want a candidate whose policies broadly align with their own preferences, they have one. His name is Donald J. Trump.
That's right, and it goes back to exactly what I just said. There aren't enough tax cuts or judges in the world to accept a president who lies constantly, who obstructs justice, and then lies about obstructing justice, who stands on a stage with Vladimir Putin and sides against our country's intelligence community, who invites foreign interference. These are just things that I think are beyond intolerable, and I won't take them as collateral for a tax cut.
So, well, right, it's not just tax cuts, but I get what you're saying. But the obstruction of justice, so you have concluded something from the Mueller report different than Mueller did.
So Mueller laid out 10 different instances of obstruction, and then he turned it over to Congress and said, and now this is on you guys. Mm-hmm. Now, have you read the Mueller report?
I have, yes. Mm-hmm. And we could go through all 10 because we've done that on this show.
Okay, but if you can read the Mueller report and not be so alarmed by what's going on in this government, then, it's difficult. It's difficult to sort of, we're clearly in a different place then, because I read that report and I am startled and stunned.
Well, what bothers you the most about it? What startled you the most?
So I think telling the White House counsel to lie and then to submit things into the official record to cover for that lie, that to me is, it's a textbook case of obstruction of justice, and we should not tolerate it. I think the way that we just have become sort of numb to the things this president does, like we're numb to this tweet yesterday telling American congresswomen to go back to their own country because they're brown. To me, it is hurting something deep inside of us as a country, because we are growing numb to these things, because we're so desperate to explain away what this president does and to defend him because he's on our side and because we don't like the left. But that's not good enough. We have to be good people in these circumstances and stand up for what is right.
So if the election were tomorrow, you would not vote for President Trump, or you would?
I would not. The never in my never Trump means never. Now, look, if Pete Buttigieg is the nominee or if Joe Biden is the nominee, I will vote for them, and I will come back 4 years later and I will try to defeat them with Nikki Haley or some other good, responsible conservative.
Really?
If it is Bernie Sanders, my mom gets my vote.
So, Joe Biden, so if this is about values and being good people, in addition to good values as expressed in policy preferences and policy choices, how do you square your value system with Joe Biden, who's a known plagiarist? Lying. Oh, my goodness. Where to begin and end with Joe Biden, in addition to all of the policy preferences that are in the direction of lawlessness, redistribution, and
family favors,
and international surrender to despots.
Like
the Iran nuclear deal, which Bill Kristol opposed.
What you're saying just completely doesn't make any sense to me.
Is that right?
Joe,
which part?
It doesn't. What is
which
lawlessness?
Part?
Well, lawlessness.
Joe Biden on Thursday gave a foreign policy speech at CUNY in New York, where he talked about respecting no borders. He is trying to walk the line, so to speak, on this whole border security matter, because he is getting, of course, a sale from the left. So he's taking positions that are untenable and illogical, just as so many Julian Castro is. I'm for decriminalization, but I'm not for open borders. That's about where Joe Biden is. So square that with your values.
So it's funny because I don't know which speech you're talking about, but I would not say that is where Joe Biden is. I think where Julian Castro is, and where a lot of the Democrats are on immigration is pretty crazy. The idea that it's not that they say they're for open borders exactly. It's more that they don't have any affirmative plan for how to deal with immigration. And obviously we have to deal with immigration. And so, I'm not going to, you and I, if we had a conversation about policy, you and I are going to agree much more than I'm going to agree with Joe Biden. The question is can I tolerate Joe Biden for 4 years because I think that Trump is doing irreparable long-term damage. I don't know how old you guys are, but I'm 38, and I want there to be a Republican, responsible party that people will be willing to vote for. Donald Trump is destroying our party for just decades in the future. We will not recover from this presidency. You cannot live on white working-class voters alone. If he wants to double down on his base, I don't know, maybe he can win a second term, but the Republican Party will never be the same. Our conservative movement has been destroyed by this president, who does not believe in free markets, who does have authoritarian tendencies, who believes in a broad expansion of executive power and rules by executive order. Everything that we've stood for, he undermines. And if a few policies where we agree is enough for you, then that's just the fundamental difference. It's not enough for me, and I am very scared about how dangerous he is for the long-term health of our party.
Yeah, I appreciate the place that's coming from, even though I disagree. But I mean, the idea of going to the other side to vote for one of these socialists, or Joe Biden, who has been a liberal for 40 years in Congress and is now going to be captured, were he the nominee, were he the president of the United States, captured by a party that is being driven by socialists, is just a bridge way, way too far for me. But that's okay. We disagree. She's Sarah Longwell, publisher of the Bulwark.